Marvellous. Oh, welcome, everyone. Today, as part of World Mental Health Awareness Week, we're talking about mental health, obviously, but with a mind of movement. And so whoever caught my lives yesterday, we were talking about yoga, aerial yoga, but lots of different kinds of yoga and sound healing. And today, I am super happy to be talking to my good friend, Chris Holmes from Fruition Osteopathy. Hello, Chris. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
I am also realising to go live on the old Instagram. That needs to happen too. So let's fire that up too. And then whoever wants to join there can. It's funny, when I was looking at obviously these conversations and thinking about movement practitioners and how we are in the body and how that affects our mental state, I automatically went into things like yoga, salsa, as I am an avid salsa dancer. I wanted to talk about that because it's helped me so much mentally. But then I started thinking more in the body and I thought, well, hang fire for a second. Who have I been to when my body has got stuck or has given me pain or isn't working? And obviously I thought of you, Chris. So obviously osteopathy, for anybody who doesn't know about it, maybe we can touch on that as well so they can know more about it. But this conversation I'm really excited to have because you are not just an osteopath, you are so much more. So we're going to go wherever the conversation takes us today. But for everyone listening, would you like to just intro yourself, tell the lovely people who you are, what you do, that kind of thing?
Okay, so I did a mass retrain about 5 years ago and became an osteopath when I grew up. I worked in children's services for about 25 years before that. Always had an interest, always had a good osteopath, saw an opportunity come up and thought, yeah, let's go for this, which didn't necessarily play out, the sort of 5-year medical degree in the interim stage of that, which was fairly tricky. But increasingly more and more throughout training, I became more and more focused on the function of movement in people's not only sort of rehabilitation process, but also in maintaining them and performing to optimum levels. And I've literally just read that off my t-shirt.
It's very honest of you.
Because we've got a tagline, rehab, maintenance, performance. But that's kind of how we like to work with people. In lots and lots of new patient appointments, especially when people maybe have been to see other people and or tried to do things themselves and haven't quite got to where they might want to, I tend to point at my couch and say, anybody that tells you that all the magic happens on one of those things is a little bit full of what.
The magic happens.
Because for me, like getting the best outcomes in any sort of like manual therapy approach is about that sort of collaborative process. So it's not about you come to me and I do that magic thing that only I can do to you. It's about, okay, well, let's figure out how you respond to a bit of treatment.
Mm-hmm.
Let's very quickly, usually by the end of the second time somebody comes here, start them off on some kind of rehabilitation, movement, exercise, stretch, strengthen, whatever's best for them, kind of approach so that they're doing something. And it's the things that happen outside of the room, which I think are of equal importance to what we do when we're in here.
Yeah.
And I think that almost transcends discipline. Like it doesn't matter whether you're an osteo or a physio or a chiro or sports therapist or whatever. As long as we're working to those principles, we're doing things that are transparent and authentic. And I think, one of the other things which we've never done here is we never sell blocks of treatment.
Interesting.
Might sell little blocks. Sometimes might sell because people are going to come in, most people are going to come in 3 or 4 times initially, and we might sort of block those together a little bit just so that you save a little bit of money on that block.
Yeah.
But I think when we start selling blocks to people of 10 or 15 or 20, I think it can become it's a difficult standpoint because who's to say that 6 treatments in, the person's nearly better, and then you've got 2 choices. You can either give them their money back or pad around for 4 sessions and potentially do things that aren't that necessary, and we might be where we want to get to. All of the practices that I've ever run have always been through one door into massive gym spaces. And that is a sort of slightly different approach to some other osteopaths. There are lots of other osteopaths who are very sort of functional movement driven and have gym spaces and rehab spaces and stuff like that. But a lot of people don't. And I think one of the advantages to that is when somebody comes in and they're describing a sort of exercise that seems to give them pain or problems or they don't seem to be getting on with. Whereas, you know, in a lot of kind of like more sort of shop front clinics, the practitioner's having to kind of like almost picture what the person means, and then some assumptions can get in the way. And whereas we've got 11,000 square feet out there of pretty much every gym toy you can get. And it's like, okay, well, let's just go and do it. And then quite a lot of the time, you know, it's like, okay, well, when I'm trying to do this movement with a bar, it hurts this part of my knee. Okay, well, let's adapt foot position. Let's just set you up a bit differently. Let's repeat the exercise. Oh, it doesn't hurt now. All right, well, just do it like that then.
Some of it's not rocket science. I mean, obviously, when I came to you with my hip, it was amazing. I'd never been to an osteopath before. So when you showed me, and that's also what I love, Chris, is that it's not snake oil. It's not like, oh, look into my eyes, you're back in the room. It's not that. It's, well, this is where you're out of alignment. You see, this hip like turned in, that's, you know, and this is what the consequence of that is. And
if it's not causing any consequences, leave it alone.
Yeah. And so don't do anything unnecessary. Yeah.
And it's like, it's that out of alignment. It's not a phrase I tend to use.
Right.
Because I think that can be a little bit, oh shit, what's wrong with me? I'm out of alignment. And I think the way I tend to phrase it to most patients is, we can maybe put this in a position that's a bit more positive for you.
Right. Yeah, that's going to work better for you.
Because, you know, we're not, there isn't the magic spirit level that you can get out and go, oh, well, if we put you 3 mil that way, all your problems will be solved. Physically,
perfection doesn't exist.
Yeah. Physically, spiritually, emotionally, everything else is going to be fine if we get that 3 mil right. And that's the kind of, that's sort of misinformation. And a lot of people will walk through the door and say things like, oh, such and such told me I've got a leg length difference, or that my hips are rotated, and that's when and I think the problem is that then people hang their hat on that concept. So it's like all of these problems are happening because I've got a leg. You know, you can't assess leg length difference without gold standard X-rays and stuff like that. It's quite subjective the way you would calculate that a lot of the time.
Yeah.
If we can keep, whilst telling people the story of what their bodies do, because then that really increases compliance rates when we start to get to things like exercise and lifestyle modification and movement and all that sort of thing, all that sort of stuff. We want to give the impression to people that this, where they've ended up to, has happened for probably a number of reasons. And it might be a bit of what you do at work and a bit of what you do as a hobby and a natural predisposition to something genetically, maybe sometimes, or you just haven't been working this part of your body very well for a while.
Yeah, so it's atrophied or whatever. Yeah, it's just stopped kind of.
I mean, there's a particular physio who I don't like very much, who will remain nameless, but he has this GIFM principle. And, you know, when something's stuck, get it moving. GIFM.
Okay. Here.
But I like that, but I like it because it's good. It's like, okay, where is this stuck and what do we do to move it?
Yeah.
Yes, you know, when you're on my couch for 30 or 35 minutes, there's lots of things we can do to get parts of your body moving. But also, let's make sure we're leaving that 15, 20 minutes at the end of the time you're here to get out on the gym floor and look at movements that will replicate the same thing. So you're keeping that nice and mobile or stretched or strengthened in the interim. And, you know, I think sometimes that sort of like range of approach is where we get the best results, because it's pointless just going off and doing stretching, particularly if you're in a crisis phase, because you just end up being a really mobile floppy noodle. we need to like, and that's sometimes not that helpful either. We need to think about, okay, well, what do we stretch? What do we lengthen? What do we strengthen? What makes you a more robust human? And then going out and putting you forwards like that should sort of keep you right.
Yeah.
If you do find you get to a point where the sort of the plan that we've designed around you doesn't seem to be getting the same results, then come back in.
Yeah.
Might be the same thing. We need to do something a bit different. Might be something different. It's when a lot of the time when people come in and go, oh, it's just the same thing as it was last time. It's like, no, let's just
it's not a haircut they're coming in for. Just do what you did last time. Because things change. Sometimes
it's an asymmetrical bob, and sometimes it needs layers.
Thanks. Yeah, exactly. Sometimes you want to change it up. I just had my haircut yesterday, by the way. So earlier, like posture, because you mentioned about a lot of us, many of us, are sat at a desk all day, sedentary. I mean, that's why obviously standing up desks and that kind of thing, getting people to move. But how many patients are you seeing that are coming in that have those postural problems? Like, what is, because we see, don't we, on public transport, we were saying earlier, like everyone's like looking at their phones and not opening up their body that way. They're like more rounded this way. What are you seeing?
I think one of the times when we were like, it was during all the lockdown stuff, because obviously we could still keep working when most people were closed, and I think things got even worse during that time because people weren't just sitting at desks; they were sitting at sort of crappy garden chairs at dining tables, and one of the things that I tried to get everybody to do was anyone that had a Swiss ball, like an exercise ball.
You mean like this one, Chris, that you told me to get that I'm sitting on? I noticed at one point we were both bobbing around, and I'm like, yes, we're both sitting on balls, but yes, so I've still got mine that you told me to get.
I'm actually on a saddle chair today, but it does very similar. It's a very similar thing.
Okay.
Saddle chair or Swiss ball, both good for sitting at a desk because they give you nowhere to hide. You've got to have a little bit of core and glute engagement. It encourages you to straighten up, even though you've got absolutely no support for your back at all. Because, people come in and say, "Oh, well, I've spent £2,000 on an office chair." I'm like, yeah, but with the greatest will in the world, you'll start off here, and 10 minutes later, you're still going to be in this position, whether you spent £2,000 on it or 50 quid from IKEA. The same challenges.
Or 20 quid on a ball.
20 quid on the ball, yeah. But 20 quid on the ball is much better money spent. So like during lockdown, we were seeing lots of people who were just haggard because they were in the house all the time, not moving, sitting at desks for longer periods of time because the statistics showed that actually people worked harder and longer when they were working from home.
Yeah.
Which very cynically makes me wonder why, lots of people haven't returned all of their staff to the office, maybe because they're getting more out of them at home. Thank you. Saved me a job. But anyway, what I was doing with them was, if you've got a Swiss ball, if you haven't, no worries, but go and put some sort of box on top of your kitchen counter, do all your Zoom calls and Teams calls standing up in your kitchen so you can be moving around, and then keep your sitting time minimal. Don't sit for longer than 45 minutes. If you've got a ball, alternate between ball, chair, standing. So at least we're getting this like 45-minute, every 45 minutes we're varying position. One of the times that I've caught myself recently because I preach posture and exercise for a living, but then once in a while you catch yourself and you go, what on earth are you doing? Why one of my real terrible times in terms of this stuff is either standing over the sink or cooking. And I've found, you're over this counter and you're like, recently what I've been doing to correct that, and it works really, really well, is I alternate from foot to foot standing on the balls of my heels.
Okay. I'm joining in.
Activates your glutes, loads your posterior chain, gets you to straighten up immediately, and then your glutes act as the stabilizer for you rather than your lower back and thoracics. Because it's that, if we hold a 4 kilogram kettlebell here, which is like the latest one we've normally got in gyms, I can still be holding it here at the end of the conversation that we're having. But if I hold it out here, a few minutes later, I'm like,
it's gonna feel heavy. Yeah.
shaking like a something or other. And it's the same principle. Your head's a pretty heavy thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you're permanently sitting in your posture,
Yeah.
then something down that chain, in terms of physics, is going to have to be the point that goes, well, I'm taking the load. Wherever that happens to be in your spinal column, it's going to end up being a bit cranky and sore and not moving so well. But if we can just shift the weight,
just have your plumb line,
just to the balls of the heels, foot to foot. I was doing it last night when I was doing the dishes. I was like, this works brilliant, actually. It's that simple.
Put some tunes on.
But it actually follows the same principle of a lot of things that I advise to people that sit at desks, because it makes using your body much smarter if we can combine what your normal workout is with what's going to be helpful to you in terms of rehabilitation.
Yeah.
If we can do both jobs in the same place, then we're doing 2 jobs in half the time. So, everyone loves efficiency, don't they?
Of course.
So if you sit at a desk all day and we've got that kind of rounded in, flex forward in the thoracic, head positions coming forwards, all that sort of stuff, we're getting short in the pec complex, and we're getting longer at some of the muscles that sit at the top of the back. So if you're that person, you don't want to come in and then just do endless bench pressing. Further through here. Like, we almost want to be opening up and stretching through here and doing some things that are going to
heart opening.
Well, heart opening, but also strengthening of things like the rhomboids and upper traps, and like all the things that we then can actually, as more of a guy rope,
hold it.
This is what I mean by like creating more robust humans. Like, we'll often get people who are in that sort of position coming in and saying, I just get this really catchy pain in my ribs here. But I also get it at the other side, the other side, and they're saying, well, of course it is. This is all compressed by being rolled in.
That's taking the weight.
And that's like, we've got lots of ligaments through there, and some of them might be a little bit loaded. So it's about that balancing act of getting people to stretch and strengthen in the right place. So do you remember when, I'm sure a parent or a teacher or somebody of such ilk will have said things like this to you, but, stand up straight, pull your shoulders back, and those sorts of things. None of those things are comfortable. So nobody copy this, because I'm about to describe something that's a bit crap. I always like to make sort of like rehab movement and exercise as easy to replicate and as memorable as possible, because then we're going to get people doing it with increasing frequency. So I used to think, okay, so if we've got people that are in this kind of head forwards, what do we do? And I thought, well, what we want to do with them is derotate the shoulders, take the shoulder blades down the rib cage. Don't do it, I said.
No, don't do it. Sorry.
Don't do it.
Simon
bring the thoracics into more extension, bring the head. But I mean, who can remember that walking around Tesco? Do you know what I mean? Like, what came first, the thoracic or the egg? And it's like, but also a lot of those things will take the part of the body that we're moving towards the end of its range. And end of range positions aren't normally very comfortable to maintain.
Yeah.
So what I do with people now is say, let's pick a neutral line of sight, something straight ahead of you. Maintaining that line of sight, and without there being any bending back with it, just bring sternum towards ceiling.
Oh yeah, it's very simple. It just brings it up. I remember you saying that to me, actually, now you've said that.
So we'll maintain that line of sight, sternum to ceiling without back bend, and then all of a sudden, I have derotated my shoulders, I have taken the shoulder blades down the spine.
Just one action.
I brought the thoracic into extension, and my head position's now more bird's eye view over my pelvis and sacrum. We've achieved all of those things with one very simple thing. And, I had a patient in the other week, and she was like, oh, I've treated her and her whole family. She went, oh, we're walking the dogs the other day. We're walking up this hill, all going, sternum to ceiling, sternum to ceiling. Because it's
sternum to the sky.
Because it's almost too simple.
Yeah. But I love that you've said that, because this is also what we talked about, wasn't it? That, mind, body, soul, that it's all interconnected. And this is where I'm going to navigate us next about, yes, the link between how you feel emotionally and mentally and the physical manifestation of that, of how it is all interconnected. And I think that's what's wonderful about this week, about mental health awareness and it being about movement, because it's the simple things that we just look past. Because in this age of technology that's flying out, and we all looking for the hacks and the complexities. But I think that example I love, because it is actually the simplest things are actually the most powerful.
Yeah, often, yeah. And I think one of the things we were talking about before, wasn't it, is like, particularly when we get a patient who's maybe somewhat tricky, dysfunction or whatever, is kind of multifaceted. Like you've come in before with a rotator cuff injury.
Yeah.
Pretty easy. We do the treatment we do with it. It improves. You do the rehab program.
Yeah.
Give it 10 or 12 weeks normally, and it'll kind of settle with going at it from a few different directions.
Yeah.
I'm working with a patient at the minute who, and it was a little bit of a, like what I was saying before about, she kind of hung a hat on a diagnosis that I don't think was very helpful.
Mm.
So she'd been told that the nerves in one of her legs were dead.
Sounds quite extreme.
And there was nothing that they could do about it.
Oh, wow. Helpful.
Okay. So started working with her about maybe 8 or 10 weeks ago. And I mean, she was so nervous about falling that she was dragging her foot. But she was dragging her foot, which then made falling much more likely. And it had all become very, very cyclic in terms of thought. Yes, there's been some direct stuff that we've had to do with her, which has got some very good results. But the main thing we've given her is confidence. When she comes in now, I split our sessions 50-50 between what we do with her on the couch, and then I give her a mini PT session in the gym. And I had remember Monty Python's Ministry of Silly Walks?
Yes. John, please.
I had her walking down the track like that the other day. Like literally one knee up, opposite hand up, like this. But like getting hip flexion to 90 degrees. And this is the person whose nerves were dead, and the prognosis was just live with it. There's nothing we can do. And it, to me, like, pain's such a funny thing to try and define, because some of it's mechanical, like we've talked about. Some of it is something's bashing off something else, or there's an injury or a tear or a rupture or whatever. But pain can also be defined as just a perception of threat. So if you feel you're a constant threat of something, you're going to be hyper vigilant.
Yeah.
If we never think anything's going to go wrong and nothing's ever going to be painful, like, you don't see many kids walking around stressed that they're going to aggravate their back, do you? Because it's just they're too busy thinking about Smarties, or like who are you going to play with tomorrow, or where I'm going on my bike, or it's those sorts of things. So yeah, I think particularly with kind of like chronic disease and dysfunction, or chronic long-term injury and pain, it can just be about like finding those inroads to confidence. Yeah, because that's so empowering.
Well, it is, because to your point, if a professional, and it's dodgy ground, isn't it? And I've heard this so many times before of doctors or other practitioners going, "Oh yeah, there's nothing we can do." It's almost like, well, no, there's always something else you can try, and who knows what it's going to do. But I think it's really interesting what you say, because it's like in the mind when we're fearful, actually how that then manifests in the body. Then often we are constricted. But that fear, it sounds like with that example you gave, that lady it was coming from a place of protection, because it was almost like, oh, I'm going to protect myself. But then it's like, well, what's that protection costing you?
Yeah, exactly.
It's keeping you stuck. It's like a false prison that's only keeping your whole body and your mind in a place of, and then you start to identify yourself with, oh, well, I am this pain, I am this person, I can't do, and it just goes everywhere from there. And
I am a trip hazard in this case.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful example, I think, of where the mind and the body are totally interconnected. The other place I wanted to go with you, because I know I'm trying to squeeze it in short amount of time to get all of the wisdom. Well, I can't extract all the wisdom from you, Chris, but
mildly superior ignorance.
Yeah. No, I'm gonna. It's wisdom. Come on, own it. Yeah, it's just about the emotional stuff, because I know you said yourself, like, some people will come into osteopathists or chiropractors with a very, it's a mechanical problem. But for those, and I asked you earlier, like, who are your kind of the people that you love to work with the most? And you said open, curious, and more wanting to look at the holistic picture.
Yeah.
I'd love for you to share with people who maybe haven't connected the dots here of where there might be trapped emotion in the body, because we talk, and this is how we came to have all of our discussions when I came to see you as a patient, but we talked about my work as a coach with energy leadership, with everything being energy, and energy is designed to move. Emotions are energy in motion, and we are made of energy. And so if our physical structure is holding on to it and pushing it down, then of course we're going to feel tightness in the body and potential physical pain. So how have you seen that with some of the people that you've worked with in terms of emotional stuckness?
I think the multifaceted approach just means that we can kind of look at people's life as a more complete canvas. So they've come in with this one thing that's brought them through the door, but also what are their sort of stress levels like? What's their nutrition like? What's their hydration like? Where else can we get those marginal gains? So one of the things that I started doing maybe a couple of years ago is I started teaching breath work for neck pain. Now, you've really got to tell someone a story about why you come in with neck pain, and I'm going to teach you how to breathe. And there's always, you're a breathwork coach, so there's always that resistance, isn't there? Where you say to someone, "Have you done any breathing before?" And they go, "Yes, I'm alive."
Hello. How do you think I'm talking and walking? Yeah.
It's on that Paul Smith thing I sent you. Have you done any breathing before? Yes, I'm alive.
Totally.
But it's that if you can take people on that little bit of a journey, it's just to why we want to do this. People tend to be quite open to trying stuff. Yeah. If you can give them the sort of justification of how we've got to this decision. So what we often find in asthmatics particularly is that they're much more of an accessory breather. So rather than using the diaphragm to descend and draw oxygen into the lungs, they use all the accessory muscles up here. So muscles like scalenes and sternocleidomastoid and upper traps and levator scapula and all this whole ring of muscle that lives around your neck, which if you hold up with a really bad cold, this is what you're going to be using to breathe, because it's elevating the thorax to draw breath in rather than utilizing the whole diaphragm and lung space. When we've got people that are also in professions that we've already mentioned, driving, desking, whatevering, where you're sitting and static, we've got this thing where people become anterior in the head carriage because that's what they're sitting with their body doing all day long. Well, then if we've got an anterior head carriage, we can't draw our best breath without the head being over the sacrum, and so everything's kind of in a line.
Raise your sternum.
Which is why when we teach breath work, we tend to be lying down or sitting up against the wall. Yeah, we've got that cue of space. So again, this is about to become cyclic in the same way that I was talking about before about fear of injury and functionality of movement. We've got a head that's sitting forward. We've got breath that's not being taken very well. So all of these muscles around the neck and upper chest are becoming hypertonic. So have too much tone, too much tension. And then it starts to reinforce the head position. So yes, we might give exercise, which starts often much lower down in the spine, looks at a bit of balancing, looks at a bit of strengthening, looks to bring the thoracics more extended, looks to bring the head position back. But then if we can add some breath work into that person too, and get them to release the diaphragm so that they are breathing more efficiently. It then takes pressure off all of these muscles up here. The head position's then easier to think about. And also the person's getting all the beauty of breath work in there too, in terms of calming the nervous system down, reducing the perception of threat. Because, you know, that's what I was saying about these kind of people that are more chronically dysfunctional, chronically ill. It's not just mechanical pain, it's their perception of threat to their body. And it becomes that kind of self-belief about the person, doesn't it? Yeah. I'm injured, I'm dysfunctional. I've got dead nerves in my leg. Hang my hat on that. So really, because that's the problem, there's nothing that can be done. What am I supposed to do?
So I've given up. Yeah.
So disempowering.
Yeah, true.
So disempowering to be like taken to that place, and it really lets people down. Because I think even with the most chronically ill and dysfunctional people, there's always movement you can incorporate.
Yeah.
Even if it's something really, really minimal. Yeah. And yes, they'll get the benefit of movement in their body, but even more so, it raises confidence and makes them more believing in their own progression and recovery.
Yeah, you've got to start somewhere, right? And just build up incrementally if you're in that way. And I love that.
You know, when we're designing exercise, I mean, within the last few months, I've had people in between the ages of 7 and nearly 90. So it takes a very different design with those kinds of patients.
Yeah.
Sometimes with sort of the younger patients and like under 8, it's about just figuring out how you can incorporate some stuff into play.
Yeah, because that's why they're going to practice it, because that's what engages them. Yeah,
it's kind of fun. So, you know, work with stability stuff and balance and hand-eye coordination with stability and stuff like that. But I mean, that's not to say I don't stand and do that with a 50-year-old bloke on the gym track the next day.
Yeah,
just with a slightly different sort of like exercise approach.
Slightly different approach. Yeah. No, it's all of this stuff. I mean, God, Chris, I can talk to you for hours. I mean, we do, but I'm conscious you've got another patient to see to coming up. But
I'm all right for 5 minutes or so.
If people are wanting to, because I know obviously if you want to touch upon, because other people, obviously you've given us some wisdom on osteopathy and energy, and obviously, I mean, yes, huge advocate for breath work. You do a lot of other things, don't you?
I do, yes.
Do you want to maybe enlighten people? Because I know you've got a retreat that you're building at the moment. So, and obviously we'll add some links in so people can know about it. But would you like to just touch on like your other passions?
Yeah. So I am a firewalking instructor, mental strength coach. We run workshops and retreats. We've got one at the minute that's kind of like just at the end of design, which is called Soul Alchemy. And yeah, we get into lots of movement stuff as part of this, because when we're talking about things like stress, anxiety, trauma, PTSD, complex trauma, past abuse, whatever, like you can go and do all of the kind of talking therapies, psychotherapy, all of which serve their place amazingly. But sometimes we've just got to move that shit out of our body in a physical way.
Absolutely. Somatic is so important.
It is. It's the somatic release stuff. And sometimes that's the only way to get to it. We've just started working with an EMDR therapist as well. And again, just a really different approach that was...
Is that the where they move the eyes?
Eye movement and,
eye movement.
And taps and
tapping
stuff.
EFT,
like,
yeah.
And yeah, I did a session of that with the and came out of it just thinking, wow, that was really quite different. And it was different enough that my body went, oh, what's this? Can I have a bit more, please? So yeah, I think if people are curious enough to look into how movement can release some of those real stuck traumas in your body, not just talking about the sort of mechanics and the more medical approach that osteopathy obviously offers, then, you know, we've got stuff in June in Northumberland. We've got stuff in September in Northumberland, and then we're going international next year. So we're going Canada and Mexico to start with, and then we want Portugal and Spain next.
Oh yeah.
So, but it's a chance to take a slightly deeper dive into ourselves as multifaceted beings. So we do look at the physical, we look more at the spiritual and emotional, and also how we can take more control and change these things and move forwards with them.
Nice. Yeah, it's about empowerment, isn't it? Because we were both joking. Like when I look back at me 10 years ago, and I was quite skeptical on a lot of things, I was closed. And then obviously life happens. And it opens you up. It cracks you open in many respects, quite literally. But I think that's where the light gets in, right? That's where the knowledge gets in. And I think you and I have both talked endlessly about, you know, the more you learn, the more you know, the less you know, because there's just so much to this. There's like layer upon layer. There's infinite layers to us as human beings. We're not just these meat suits that, you know, can be manipulated. We're far more than that.
But it's why, you know, when we do whatever sort of events that we're doing in the kind of firewalking empowerment world, you know, it's really common that people come up to you afterwards and say, "Oh, thank you so much for that." It's like, we didn't do anything. We literally presented you with an opportunity. Yeah, you did everything. You did it yourself.
You either step into it or you don't. Yeah.
Like we just showed you a thing and said, "I think you benefit from this, but totally your call."
Yeah.
You know, all we do is present opportunities. People walk through it themselves, and they walk through that sort of space when they're ready, I think.
Yeah. We often talk about when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So it's something that maybe you hadn't have maybe thought about or realized before. Hence why this week I'm having these conversations, because there's so many different ways you can come at movement. And I think there's so many different modalities, different practices, and it's what calls to you, because it's not one and done. And it's not, you've got to find your own way, haven't you? You've got to find what works for you individually, because it's not a cookie cutter approach for everybody.
No, not at all.
Yeah. Not. Well, I am going to let you heal some more people today and go. But thank you so much for coming on and just sharing all of that. I really appreciate it. We'll make sure that that's your website there, isn't it? fruitionosteopathy.co.uk. And I'll make sure those are the links are there, so people can click on them if they want to come and seek you out.
By all means.
Come and see
you. And you know, the sort of tagline on all of our rehab videos is "Movement is medicine, stillness is illness."
Oh, nice.
And I put it on as this little kind of glib tagline, and I thought, actually, do you know what? I really quite like that.
Yeah, no, it's true. We're designed to move, aren't we? So it's really important that we do. I always love the analogy of the ocean that moves and a stagnant bog. When you think of water, it's like the stagnant. Are you a stagnant bog, or are you a free flowing river, ocean that is always moving and changing? And that's what we want to get to.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Have a lovely rest of your afternoon, and we shall say goodbye to these beautiful people. Let me just end. Thank you everyone for joining. Let me end that video on there and there. Bye, people.